Hey everybody, Six String Supplies. Today we're going to be doing a video on how to wire a 5-way Telecaster. Obviously the main difference being that we're using a 5-way blade switch as opposed to a 3-way, which is what you typically find in a Telecaster. Now what that does, I will discuss in a bit more detail, but obviously we're adding 2 extra switching positions to our setup. Otherwise, all the components are exactly the same. As always, I'll just give you a quick overview of the equipment and the components using before we load everything into the control plate. And as usual, there'll be step-by-step instructions on how to wire the setup with some cheeky diagrams in the bottom of your screen, so just to make everything nice and clear. So first off here, we've got a 5-way blade switch. This is CRL USA. Quite simply, I suppose it is really high end. It's probably the best on the market. It's a bit more durable than the oak switches you get, but you can use either or. We're using that as opposed to a 3-way, obviously. Got 2 of these. Now these are 250k solid shaft CTS pots. They're both audio taper, so it's the same pot for both volume and tone. Got a Switchcraft jack socket, pretty self-explanatory. Rubber tubing, obviously this is entirely optional, but if you've watched my videos you'll know that I like to use some yellow or small diameter just to insulate the capacitor leads, and black I'm going to be using on the jack socket. Now I've got 2 capacitors here. Now one of them's a tone capacitor, which will go on our tone control, and the other one is going to be going onto the switch itself. So for your tone control, you can use whatever you typically use for Telecasters. You can use a 0.047 UF, a 0.033, a 0.022. I'm using a 0.022 for this setup. But you might, if you follow the video, you might find that you might want to mix and match and just go with what works for you and your ears best. And the other one here is a 5000 PF orange drop, which we're going to be putting onto the switch itself. That will have a contribution onto how the switching positions sound, so I'll be explaining that in a bit more detail in a second. Hakko soldering station, cloth wire as usual, tin copper, lead-free solder, and it's Sunday morning, so a coffee. Okay, so I'm just going to load all this into the control plate and then we'll take it from there. Okay, so I've put all the components into the control plate as you would for a typical Telecaster. Now just a quick note on the switching options. If I turn it over just to make it easier, excuse the manky control plate. This has been my template for 4.5 years or so. Anyway, all the way forward is neck only, typical Telecaster. Second position is neck and bridge in parallel, again, typical Telecaster. Third position, same as normal Telecaster, that's bridge only. Now the next 2 are where the new positions come into play. So fourth one there is the pickups half out of phase of each other, which is quite hard to describe really, but it's very similar to, it kind of mimics that in-between sound you get on a Strat in positions 2 and 4. It's a bit fuller, it's a bit louder. It's just quite unique. Definitely probably the better sounding position on this setup. All the way back is neck only again, but it's a bit brighter, so it's got about 10 to 15%, depending on which capacitor you use on the switch, dialed on top of this position. So it's really good for like a solo boost or bit of jazz playing or whatever you get up to really. But that's that there. So like I say, those 2 positions will change depending on the capacity you put on the switch, but that's something for yourselves to work out. Okay, so typically we'll start with a little bit of grounding. As you can see, I've already put a ground wire between the 2 pots. That's not needed, by the way. I do it out of habit just to reinforce the ground. If your control plate is metal and does conduct electricity, then you're all good. Obviously, if your control plate somehow looks like this on the underside, you probably would want to put a reinforced ground down, because as you can see, this plating is slowly but surely being eaten away. There's no harm in reinforcing the ground whatsoever. First thing we're going to do is just ground this lug here on the volume pot, as we do with any typical guitar setup. So I'm just going to fill the eyelet with solder. And then when it's cooled, we're going to bend it back onto the pot casing and solder it into place. And we also need to ground one position on the switch onto the back of the pot as well, so we'll do that separately. So bend it all the way back. Like so. And we also need to ground this position on the switch, which will be coming on your screen now in the form of a small diagram. We're going to have a piece of black cloth wire going from this position, this lug, to the pot casing. You don't have to use cloth wire, you can use whatever wire you want. Wire is wire. I just have always used it. And with black and yellow, you've got two distinct colours, which make it a bit easier. Oops, excuse me. So I'm just going to tin this solder lug. Like so. And like I say, we're just going to pop that to the back of the pot. Doesn't really matter where you do it, but I'm just going to try and put it on the edge. I'm just going to tin this wire just to make it easier to connect to the pot casing. Okay, so that's the grounding done. Next we're going to move on to the rest of the switch. Okay, so moving on to the switch, next we need to connect a small jumper wire connecting this solder lug here to the one on the other side. So I'm going to be using a little jumper wire of tinned copper, as I've done a lot in recent videos. I've bent it into the shape of a staple, which just allows me to rest it in place before securing it. And again from the other side. Sorted. Next we're going to be using some cloth wire just to connect the switch to the volume input. So that's this lug here, and that's going to go to the input of the volume lug, which is this one here on the left. So again, I'm just going to use some cloth wire for this. Just going to tin the edges of this lug. And again, just lightly tin the volume input. Just like that. And I'm just going to pop that into the volume input. I'm not going to solder it into place just yet, simply because we now need to connect the volume control to the tone control, which again is just simple cloth wire going from this solder lug to the one directly opposite on the tone control. So again, I'm just going to tin this solder lug. Just like that. Okay, so next we're going to put both the capacitors in place. We're going to have the 5000 PF on the switch itself, and the 0.022 tone cap will go on the tone control. Right, so for the 0.022 tone capacitor, it's going across these lugs here of the tone control. So we're going to have one end of the cap soldered to this lug here, and the other one would be going through this lug and grounded to the back of the pot casing. So I'm just going to trim your leads to size. Feed the leads through. Just going to tape that end down just to stop it moving. Just like so, and again we're just going to ground that onto the pot casing. just like that, as per the diagram on your screen. Okay, and next we're going to put the 5000 PF cap onto the switch, which is going to be running from this one here right at the top, going to the one right at the bottom on the other side. So we're going to be using some rubber tubing just to stop the leads from hitting something they shouldn't. I'm going to run it all the way around. Like so. That's one end in. Just going to bend that round. And like I say, I'm just going to use a bit of tubing to cover this lead to stop it hitting any of the other switch terminals there. Just shrink that down with the heat gun. And solder that into place. Like so. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the jack and installing the pickups. Right, so for the jack socket, a jack socket is really simple to wire up. I'll just explain quickly how you do it. So this lug here, so that's the one with the inner ring. If you're using a Switchcraft, it's got a Switchcraft embossed on it, but it doesn't matter if it's Switchcraft or not. The inner ring is the ground lug. So we're going to connect a wire there, and then that's going to go to the ground on top of the pot casing. And this one here is the hot or the signal, which is where we're going to be connecting it from the output to the volume control, which is the middle lug on the volume pot. So what I tend to do here, here's a pre-wired jack socket. So you can see I've got the black wire on the inner ring and the yellow one is the signal. Rubber tubing is completely optional. It's just to make it a bit more durable, to keep the cloth wire from fraying around and things like that. Another good tip is to twist the wires together. So wrapping the ground wire around the signal wire does offer it, albeit limited, but it offers a little bit of protection from interference, so a little bit of shielding there. So like I say, what we're going to do, we're going to pop the ground, the black one, onto the top of the pot casing, and the yellow cloth wire is the input. That's going to go to the middle lug of the volume control. So I'm just going to cut the ground to length. And solder it to the back of the pot casing. You can put it on the volume control, you can put it wherever you want as long as it's grounded. Like so. Just going to twist them over. And we're going to connect the yellow wire to the output of the volume. which is the middle lug. Like so. Okay, so that's the jack connected. The final thing we need to connect, I'm going to show you how you put in your pickups, and then we're pretty much done. Okay, so the pickups are nice and easy to connect. We'll start with the neck pickup. So the signal wire from your pickup is going into this solder terminal here, and the ground from the neck pickup is going to the same solder lug as the capacitor on the other side of the switch. So I'm just going to reheat the solder on this solder terminal. Just like so. And like I say, the ground is going to the same solder terminal as we have with the capacitor on here. Like so. And the bridge pickup, the signal wire is going to this terminal here, just next to the neck pickup. I'm just going to tin that lug. Like so. And the ground for the bridge pickup just goes to ground, so we'll put it on the volume pot casing here. And we'll just pop it somewhere in the middle, doesn't really matter where. Just like so. Okay. Obviously the final thing you need to do when you put everything back in your guitar is just connect the ground from the bridge to the circuit. So generally put it on the back of one of the pots, it doesn't matter. That's how you wire a 5-way Telecaster. Give it a go. You don't need to modify your pickups in any way like you would do with a 4-way setup. Thanks very much for watching, guys. If you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to get in touch, and we'll see you next time.